Well, there was 3 or so minutes. I was just saying that how excited it was to be back from New York, and I'm going to do this in two parts. I have altered the second half of the presentation based on materials I heard on Sunday about the Korean and Japanese reception, as well as what Yuki was just talking about in the previous panel. I'm going to read through the first half and then talk through the second because the ideas from the conference have been so exciting to incorporate. But let me start by just saying that the nearly 2 decades that I have spent tracking the partial remains of early American serials, returning again and yet again to archival vaults and half-lit viewing carols, has been sustained by a lively curiosity. I now suspect that curiosity may very well be the point, an idea that struck me one sluggish afternoon as I crouched over a Steenbeck viewing machine at the Library of Congress, threading onto the spools a reel labeled Episode 2 of The Lightning Raider, Pearl White's 9th serial vehicle, only to realize it was Reel 2 of Episode 2. The first half of the episode was presumed to be no longer extant. Puzzled, I watched as a figure kind of is in a police station. There's this ebony block. There seems to be a sense that she's drunk. There's a kind of appeal to the police chief. And although it sounds a little bit contrived, it's enough for him to say, well, let her go. She kind of about to stumble out. There's another close shot on this ebony block, this material object, and she's shunted outside. I'm watching him because this is part of a Dawson City print, which is so blurred and deteriorated. She goes outside, and then the police realize she's escaped with this object. And on the corner, she peers, and suddenly there was a close shot, miming that initial close shot. The false teeth come out, and yes, it was Pearl White, the Lightning Raider. Curious indeed. I'm going to let you watch a little bit more of the chase scene that ensues momentarily. But let me say that when I speak of curiosity, I mean to invoke both senses of the term. On one hand, curiosity is an active verb. It refers to the passion to know, to inquire, investigate, seek out, explore. And in Western culture, curiosity, understood as a transgressive form of inquiry, appearing into forbidden terrain, has long been associated with women. Think Pandora or Eve, Original Sin, or think of any number of Bluebeard's many wives. Women's curiosity has likewise been associated with a caring for, an investment in materials and ideas otherwise deemed suspect, negligible, or unworthy of critical scrutiny. Hence the proximity of women's curiosity with the realm of gossip and of idle speculation. And beyond that, a feminized mass culture public's appetite for sensational serialized fiction, a phenomena decried by self-professed cultural guardians and male intellectuals in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as an addictive, compulsive curiosity for the to be continued installments, a curiosity about what will happen next, a curiosity which critics from Claude Levi-Strauss, when he was speaking of the 19th century roman feuilleton, to say Herbert Bloomer speaking of the serial film's effect on young people in his 1933 study, Movie and Conducts, decried as both puzzling and deeply distressing. In this brief meditation, I urge us to recuperate curiosity as a feminist methodology, as an affective relationship toward the archives, and as a viewing stance common to the long durée of serialized fiction. In doing so, let me stress that the second common sense of the term curiosity assumes the property of a noun or object. It is a figure or thing, the curio, that is unusual, strange, bizarre, or otherwise transgressive of the norm. In the British and American vernacular of the 19th century, a curio came to be synonymous, among other things, with junk, with distressed relics, with obsolete, dusty, misused, or misplaced things that defy categorization. Things often scattered about in what Charles Dickens, for instance, called the old, stressing the old, curiosity shop. In this sense, the decaying partial prints of early serial episodes, the likes of which I've been sharing here, the deteriorated footage, the scraps of nitrate, all of these are curious objects indeed. Because I've been collecting many of these curios, as it were, and wanted to share as many as possible, I have created a short video essay. It's my first attempt to create something of this sort that I want to share with you. And in doing so, let me say two things. First, that my initial impulse, a guiding impulse, was to think about the ways in which Pearl White, Grace Cunard, Ruth Rowland, Grace Darmon, and others are exemplary of the double nature of curiosity itself. That is, these female stars and the characters they play represent curiosity as a kind of subjective act, as figures who want to seek out and know. But they are also themselves curiosity as object, as the thing that provokes inquiry, that's transgressive or different from the norm. Throughout the video essay as well, I'm in conversation with Barbara Benedict's study on curiosity in the 18th century in literature and the arts. And you'll see three quotes, all of them come from Benedict's study. At the same time, I simply want to mention that I've been thinking a lot, both in the extended conference in New York and going into that, about the kind of relationship of our work and what we've been doing with feminist media histories relative to a longer lineage of feminist film theorists. And because Alice, Lewis Carroll's Alice of Alice in Wonderland, is a curious female herself, and because Teresa de Lauretis spoke of Alice in her 1984 study, saying that she likes to think of her as a parable suggesting the situation, the predicament, and the adventure of critical film feminism. I have employed two different, both an independent Celtic musician, Erutron, who wrote a piece of music called The Jabberwocky, as well as dialogue from the 2010 adaptation of Lewis Carroll's tale to provide musical accompaniment. This video essay runs approximately just over 4 minutes. I'm going to turn, I'll just play it and I'll be back.
How curious. Twas brillig and the slithy dove stick gyre and gimble in the lake. On them see were the borogoves and the monarchs out grape.
What do you call yourself?
Alice.
Really?
There's been some debate about that.
I never get involved in politics. You'd best be on your way.
What way? All I want to do is wake up from the stream.
Fine. I'll take you to the Hare and the Hatter. But there's the end of it.
So rested he by the tum-tum tree, stood a while in thought, and as no fish that he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tall wood, and rippled as it came.
Let's see, excitable, proud of fantasy, textbook case of female hysteria. We have her fixed in no time. Stop her!
always were an irksome, flourish, interrupting thing.
Okay, I've turned my probably made the mistake of turning off my my screen, which is no longer available. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I seem to have gotten stuck on here. Let me try this. There we go.
Oh, sorry, JB, you're back in the presenter mode. So the magic button that you hit earlier, could you do that again?
This is, let me see if I can do this quickly. It's really unfortunate. Did that work?
Yeah, that worked.
Excellent. Let me skip forward quickly. I had, as I mentioned earlier, there were various reasons for employing Alice in Wonderland and for the music, and part of that, obviously, the curiosity, but also the way in which, as Nina Auerbach says, that this story and this figure of Alice denaturalizes customs, habits, and mores. And what I had wanted to do was kind of think through how to denaturalize certain habits of feminist readings of the serials, which tend to kind of lump together these films simply based on active female protagonists. And that what we need to do is think about the various styles, the various genres. And once we start doing that, that we begin to think about the way in which these certain lineages of these serials are deeply imbricated in what I'm calling a romance of Orientalism. Now, at this point, I had been thinking with Ho-Mei King's book, The Enigmatic Signifier, where she talks about the curios that populate so many kind of Orientalism in 20th century cinema. And she's thinking about these objects as one which defy kind of Western forms of cognition, that Orientalism is kind of operating in a variety of ways. In some of the ways that you may have noticed were emerging in the latter part of Alice Does. And it became a kind of interesting experiment while editing to kind of think through how to negotiate between these. What I want to do now, though, rather than continue with the work with Ho-Mei King and Curiosity, is to think about what's been going on in terms of what I've been learning about the Japanese and Korean reception of these films, especially The Broken Coin, which I had, and Grace Cunard and Francis Ford, which I had been employing before, just to make certain we realize the term romance is a genre term that's so popular at the time. And it's not about love. Love, adventure, and romance are separate in these kinds of publicities. Instead, as Chung Won Chung was telling us on Sunday in a really wonderful presentation, thinking about the way in which these films were received is to understand that the romance is about a genre that's improbable, that's fantastical, that's marvelous. It separates itself from realism. And the type of romances that Grace Cunard and Francis Ford in particular were engaged in were both a Ruritanian romance, that of the fictional kind of kingdom, as we saw with Broken Coin, but also kind of what was called the romance of adventure in Lucille Love. And I wanted to play a little clip for you here. One of several. I've been collecting some of the extant elements. And you see some of the what Yuki was just talking about the Japanese audiences writing in, talking about their ability to kind of yell, not be absorbed as they would be with, say, with shoes, as she was discussing it, but yelling back at and cheering along with the kind of performance style and the expression of facial expressions of Grace Cunard. And of course, I had chosen this initially because this is also one of two moments in which Grace Cunard is garbing herself in this kind of, she's trying to hide on this ship, and is dressed in a kind of an Oriental pseudo fashion. We also see this in a quite different episode of Lucille Love. I think it's worth sharing a moment when Francis Ford, who's playing the international spy, Hugo Lubeck, is himself disguising himself in order to try and figure out what's going on the ship. Two different ships, two different scenes. But you see that kind of nature of the flaunting of the performative, of the dressing up, of the disguising. You also see a lot of work with shooting in depth, which these serials in particular of the Cunard Ford team are well known for, or at least what I see in them. However, you see it too in The Purple Mask. We watched a little bit of that last Sunday. At the same time, both with Yuki as chair, and this was the Sunday panel, and with Ruud Mercanjels talking about also Japanese reception of the serials. And he foregrounded for us both Pearl White and Ruth Roland, as well as Cunard. And he talked about, gave us different lists. You see Lucille Love and others here in 1916, but he started by explaining that it was Pearl White's films that were the first in 1916, all of hers between 1914 and 1916 released, whether simultaneously or not. Of course, the romance, that concept, that genre, very palpable here, but it's a different kind of romance. It's very much the kind of mystery, detective, the exploration of this kind of dangerous world. And it becomes, at the end of the exploits, very much associated with a master criminal who is an Oriental villain. And by 1919, with The Lightning Raider, it is Warner Oland's first role in yellow-faced performance as Wu Fang. You see here in these advertisements, he's both in Oriental kind of yellow-faced garb, and then also will appear in his kind of day-to-day Western attire. I wanted to just kind of circle back to this, where we began with Lightning Raider episode 2, as I now have more access to a longer version of this episode. To show you some of what Warner Oland's doing in this role, the counterplot, we know this is in the house, and what Warner Oland's character is doing is trying to say, oh, I think these young ladies need to be investigated because they are potentially holding on to this ebony item that the police are looking for. There's some kind of, crime has been committed. They are investigated, but nothing is found. We see Pearl very close to Wu Fang. And then as the guests leave, and intertitle tells us, Pearl White's character flips the switch. They're in a kind of tense pas de deux, one with another. And she's saying, oh, I think maybe he has it. And he is searched and it is found. And this takes us back, this clip kind of takes us back to where we started at the opening of the talk. And I'll just end by saying that I've been thinking a lot over the past couple days, trying now to kind of think with Ray Chow, and particularly the way in which she asks us in ethics, going back to ethics after idealism, to think of that that there are occasions to kind of think about something that moves beyond straightforward anti-Orientalist critiques and toward an analysis of fantasy structures that motivate these representations, suggesting that a precondition for such work is that we must problematize the presumption of stable identities, rather than simply aim for more accurate representations. When she proposes figures of hybridity and miscegenation as possible objects, she's certainly not talking about the sort of yellow-faced performance embodied by Warner Oland as Wu Fang, nor that character's relationship with Pearl White as the Lightning Raider. But in light of both these images on the screen and new research regarding the overwhelming popular reception of these films in Japan and colonial Korea, I find it fruitful to think through Chow's conclusion that the binary opposition between East and West must itself be rethought, and the question of how self and other imagine, relate to, and represent one another must be posed anew. I'm going to end there, out of time, and but wanted to leave you with this one image and with a question, a curiosity, one I've held of my own, and perhaps Yiman, you might be the best person to know, Daisuke, if you're still out there, or many others, that there is a Japanese actor who plays a central role in Pearl of the Army, and I've been unable to identify who he is. I have clips showing him performing along with, as a kind of helpmate to. I'll leave that with you there and simply encourage you, if we don't have time in Q&A, to contact me and talk further. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jennifer, for such a really fascinating talk. So we'll save the questions to the end of the panel. And now let me introduce our third speaker, Anu. Professor Anu Prabhala is an associate professor at Loyola Marymount University. Her research focuses on the materiality, potency, and impact of sound and image in early South Asian cinema. She's co-editor of the award-winning, co-editor with Jennifer Bean, of course, and Laura Horak, and of this award-winning volume Silent Cinema and the Politics in 2014. So please join me in welcoming Professor Prabhala to the screen.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're in. Now, I'm just trying to see if my screen is visible. Are you able to see my screen?
We see a blank page.
I wonder why.
So when it happened to me, it turned out I was showing a blank board, something called whiteboard or something.
Right, I just removed that. So are you able to see it now?
No, it's still blank.
Okay, let me try resharing. Yeah, it's saying participants can see your whiteboard. How do I get
so right next to the whiteboard, you will see a PowerPoint slide. So you select that instead. So instead of sharing your whiteboard, you want to share your PowerPoint.
Oh, I don't know how to do that.
So when you click on the share, if you exit the share and then share again, there should be a bunch of options coming up and letting you choose what to share.
Okay, let me try. Sorry about this.
The setup is weird. I've never had this whiteboard as an option before.
I've never had this issue before either.
I haven't either. You think we'd all be like, Zoom specialists by now.
Okay. Is it visible now?
Now we see it.
Okay, thank God.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to try to do the full screen. Yeah, it was giving me that option at the beginning, and now I know what to click on. Okay. All right. Thank you, Yiman, and great to be here with you, Jennifer Bean, and it feels like a reunion already after New York. So I'm going to talk about melodrama in the silent era in Indian cinema. And one of the key issues here is that there are discrete elements here from music, from dance, and from other performative idioms that are self-contained in their own, but then the cinema kind of throws them into disarray, although they're already quite self-contained. And what happens to these elements with the coming of cinema, also from literature and painting, is a question that I want to ask. And then throughout the paper, I will be arguing that to talk of melodrama in Indian silent cinema is to talk of music, although there is no formal musical accompaniment in the way that we have in the West. And this also has something to do with the operatic modes of Indian theater, and these are different forms of musical theater that are very, very popular on the 19th century stage. And one is Nautanki, one is Farsi theater, one is Sangeet Natak, different languages, but all bringing very forcefully into a theatrical melodramatic form these self-contained musical and dance performative idioms that I was talking about earlier. And the pictorialism of these musical dramas, the use of costume and the use of gesture, elaborate speech and song in highly moving ways. The deep interior, of course, is central to the ways in which tableau posing becomes a crucial mode of expressing feelings on the stage. So this is actually a productive disaggregation of music, dance, and other genre formats that throws the stage and the cinema into ferment. It leads to feverish experimentation in the cinema, and often this experimentation is unsystematic, it is precarious, yet always highly resourceful and innovative. And as you can see here in this slide here, we've got, this is not vaudeville, we've got one Swadeshi or national moving picture, one American serial, and we've got quite a kind of mixture of different forms that you could all enjoy in the same evening. So there's even more disaggregation with the coming of silent cinemas from outside of India. And here, this is Phalke's The Birth of Sri Krishna. You can see here that they could be seen with episode 8 of The Hidden Hand and 6 reels together with 2 first-class Pathe comics, which I think is quite interesting. And you could take your pick from dance in the same evening. So that would be the evening's amusements. So how is emotion staged? My first example here is a filmmaker called Babu Rao, a painter who was Maestri, that was his original name, but he's born into a family of traditional craftsmen, and he builds his career painting backdrops for the musical dramas that I had mentioned earlier, and that's how he gets his name, painter. And he develops a very sophisticated form of art direction and shooting techniques, manufactures his own camera, uses backdrops in order to register the right shades of gray, and also uses indoor electric lighting and fades, etc., along with costume design and art direction to dramatize the psychic states of characters. And the film that I will be showing a clip from is called Sati Savitri. The film company he founded was the Maharashtra Film Company. And it is based on an Indian myth, which is a variant of the Eurydice myth, except that it's a reversal. Instead of Hades bringing, here what happens is that it is Sati Savitri who decides, excuse me, very bad throat. Sati, I hope you come back. Savitri decides to bring her husband back. Excuse me. Yeah, this is something I picked up on my flight on the way back. It's not COVID, but hopefully my voice will come back. Okay, so it's a reversal of the Eurydice myth, where Sati Savitri decides to bring her husband back from the dead. Now, in general, Sati Savitri has been seen as a very kind of traditional Indian woman who is dedicated to her husband. But I'm arguing that Savitri is actually a woman who desires her husband to the point that she's willing to fight with the god of death to bring him back. And here's a clip from this film. It's 1927, directed by Baburao Painter. And I'm going to talk over the clip. There's no music here. And Satyavan, her husband, is a woodcutter. And this is the day on which he has been predicted. It's been predicted that he's going to die. So she insists on accompanying him to the forest. And here they are as a happy couple. And watch what happens. Just wait to see what happens. Savitri is happy here. She decides to pick some flowers. The flowers express, of course, her joy that the husband is still alive, Satyavan is still alive. But she says that too soon, and a tree falls on him. He is hit. She rushes to his rescue. Satyavan is deeply injured, badly injured. She cradles him in her arms, prays to the heavens, to the gods, to keep him alive, and he dies. And she's hysterical with grief. And wait to see what happens. And there is the god of death. This is obviously one of the big moments of painter's Satyavan Savitri. And he insists on extracting his soul, Satyavan's soul, and that light that you're seeing is Satyavan's soul. Now, this is a fragment. We don't have the rest of the film, but we do know from other versions that from here on, Savitri actually takes on the god of death and tricks him into returning that soul that he has just taken away from Satyavan. So I'm going to move to my next slide. And in all of these images that we just saw, the central image that I wanted to highlight is Savitri knows before she marries Satyavan that he's going to die. And this particular gesture here is the gesture where she says she will fight with the god of death. In a way, she's already prepared for this moment when Satyavan will die. And she is very much in love with her husband. And there's a series of looks and glances where she decides that he's so attractive that she must have him at any cost. So both gesture and landscape work very well here to imagine female desire, but something else starts to happen around this time, and that is the arrival of German Expressionism. So enter Franz Austin, and he comes from Munich. He's also worked with Amelka in Bavaria. He's, interestingly enough, also associated with the Nazi Party. But the reason why I mention that is because there are other progressive intellectuals here, like Himanshu Rai and Niranjan Pal, who are working out of London based on a stage play where they are trying to actually modify whatever Austen brings from Germany to adapt it to Indian theatrical traditions. So the authorship here then is shared between Pal, Austen, and Rai. And when Shiraz, which is going to be my second example here, is shot, it actually is transnational because the capital here is coming on the one hand from the British via Indian intellectuals, but also German capital. It's all coming together in this film, which the Los Angeles Times, which was recently restored by the British Film Archive, describes as drenched in visual exoticism, including everything from trained monkeys and dangerous snakes to rings that dispense hidden poison. So what happens then to German Expressionism, which is a particular strand that arrives in India, has to confront the forces of colonialism, but also the resistance of Indian intellectuals like Rai and Pal. Enter also actresses like Inakshi Ramarao, who are well-born, who are postgraduate or a graduate. She's the daughter of a judge. She is English-speaking, and also trains as a dancer. So we have a fresh influx of performance styles that people like Austen, who didn't speak a word of Hindi, must contend with. And I'm very grateful to the Bhavnani Family Archives for this image of Inakshi Ramarao. Now, this is a production still from Shiraz. So what actresses like Inakshi Ramarao bring is a new kind of naturalism. They also bring education, restraint, and grace. That is very much about the piecing together of an identity that has been broken by the encounter with colonialism. And German Expressionism then intervenes in this mix in order to help with this reconstruction. I also want to say here that I found very few references to the use of musical accompaniment, and it's only super productions like Shiraz, we're talking about transnational capital here, big capital, that allow a film like Shiraz to be screened for the royal family in 1928 with musical accompaniment. So as you can see here, only other big productions, this is based on Tagore, who was the Nobel laureate, his play and then film Sacrifice. Only these films, and you can see how brief this description is, appropriate Indian music. So very, very scant references to the use of music. Shiraz, of course, continues to run in India through 1929. And it is Inakshi Ramarao who's advertised here. This is the Blu-ray of Shiraz featuring Sita Devi, interestingly, who is more Eurasian or white-looking, who is cast as the vamp in Shiraz. And it's Inakshi, the trained English-speaking Indian actress, who's also a dancer, who's cast as the heroine. And we can see here that these films are, in fact, in the English press, given a pride of place that other Indian films like Painter would not have gotten. So a hierarchy is being set up, but I'm not interested here in setting up a dichotomy. The press was setting up this hierarchy, but what I am interested in is the clash that this sets up, and it's a very productive clash in my mind. This is the title card from Shiraz, produced entirely in India, no studio construction or artificial lighting, the very things that Painter would have been known for. And of course, a reference to British capital here. So let's move on to a couple of clips maybe that's all I'll have time for from Shiraz. So this is the market in Shiraz. And we'll see here the use of music, pictured music, and dance. So let me pause there. Now, this is Nach, which is very much the Oriental, British Orientalist word for Indian dance. The audience that you see in the film here in Shiraz is not the audience that would have watched the film at the theater that I had just shown. Here's another clip from Shiraz. This is Inakshi Ramarao, who is seen here with Charu Roy. Shiraz is based on the story of the Taj Mahal, and its subtitle was called A Romance of India. And this is the romance between king and queen. Again, wait for what we're about to see. Very often in this film, we can see a lip sync that matches to English words. And since this is a romance of India, which is meant for exhibition in premier theaters, here's the kiss between king and queen. Now, for Indian audiences, it is this kiss which would have been exotic, and it in fact would not have had some of the emotional resonance of what we saw in painter Sati Savitri, because it does not have the use of gesture that we saw earlier. This is indeed a more naturalistic style of acting that Indian audiences would have experienced as exotic, but was definitely feted by the English press. So there are different performative registers that are being set up here between these two types of films. And again, I'm not trying to set up a dichotomy. Rather, what I'm interested in is the collision of these styles, which forces melodrama to reinvent itself. And in the one, landscape amplifies emotion and intimacy. In the other, landscape is a panorama that connotes distance. On the one hand, we have grace and restraint. And on the other hand, we also have a new kind of rage that comes in through German expressionism in a film like Shiraz, but that is reserved for either lower class characters or characters who are marked as white and foreign, interestingly. So malevolence is seductive and heightened, the slave rages in Shiraz. So in other words, then the absence of sound produces more mellows, and it forces a polarization of emotion, which is very new to Indian cinema, given the other pre-existing formats that I had mentioned earlier, where you have a variety of emotions rather than a polarization. But this polarization has something to do with German expressionism and the way it is taken up by Indian cinema. Gesture is rigorously pre-negotiated. Space becomes a Manichaean playground. The frontal is confronted by the perspectival. The spectacular engages the subjective. And the panoramic gaze of colonialism is disturbed by the private and the intimate. And I've tried to reassess melodrama as a distinctly modern, globally circulating mode in order to ask how melodrama's relation to modernity, music, and orality can be seen within a distinctly Indian configuration. And in India, melodrama's survival and growth depended on the ability to heighten speech rhythms and musical movement, and understanding melodrama as a mode that can picture emotions visually as situated female performance within a regime of artistic innovations predicated on the use of tableau framing and a panoramic staging that somaticizes deeply felt states of being. And it is very much possible to write this history of melodrama and of female performance, although much of Indian silent cinema has been lost. And at stake here are key concepts in film theory and film history. And to conclude, The refiguration of dance, monologue, soliloquy, dialogue, enhanced by camera blocking, use of iris, facial expressions, location, panoramic landscape, sets, etc. What does this do? It revisits inherited self-contained modes of performance, takes on colonial aesthetic imperatives, contends with the arrival of a very specific strand of German expressionism in India, and last, and certainly not the least, initiates and constantly restages a globally shared melodramatic vernacular. In the process, it also negotiates deep inequalities and this between female performers, folk, professional, brown, white, Eurasian, Jewish, educated, self-taught, music, drama, classical, dance, etc. But it is women who are embracing the challenge of staging and picturing finely calibrated structures of feeling in Raymond Williams's sense, and also bhava and rasa, which are the Indian words. Late silent cinema was so distinctive in India because the absence of sound forced it to present and bring to the surface an intricate expressive universe that was crucial for the resurgence of melodrama in the late 1920s in India, which would again be disrupted by the coming of sound, but that's something for another paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu. So I think we have about 10 minutes for a Q&A, and please do feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A button by hitting the Q&A button. Or if you prefer to actually voice your question, you can raise your hand, and Yulong will be able to bring you into the frame, I guess. So I see an inquiry from Yuki, who says, can you let me know if I can find some information? This is for Jennifer, Professor Bean, Jennifer Bean.
I think Yuki is saying that
yeah, she will let
she
you
doesn't know who the Asian chauffeur is, but that she might be able to find some information. Yeah, and Yuki, if you're out there listening, also, I was really curious in Rudmer Kanjel's presentation on Sunday, which Yuki graciously and really wonderfully kind of chaired and had a series of questions for both Junhwa and Rudmer. But Rudmer, in his slides, I was taking like photographs from the side of the audience and went back through them and realized that he's saying that although every of the like dozens and dozens and dozens of serials he was listing as being released in Japan, they were all coming to Japan like within 1 year of their being made in the States, except for Pearl of the Army. He had Pearl of the Army being listed as being released in 1921, along with 4 or 5 others that were made in 1920. And I was so curious by that. And Yuki, maybe this is something I will write you and see if we can talk further or collaborate, because I found that fascinating and interesting, in part because it is the only serial, bit of serial that remains that I've seen. Oh, there you are, Yuki. Hey. That has an Asian performer, not someone performing in yellowface and playing a central role. So why the delay? Yeah.
Hi, sorry for interrupting you. And well, I'm not really the specialist about the American serials in Japan, so I just hope that Rudmer would be here. But I think the Pearl White is also very famous and popular in Japan. After all the Grace Kuner became the serial queen, then soon the Pearl White became another serial queen for the Japanese audiences. And I think some audience just compare the Grace Kuner and Pearl White, and which are better for the serial queen or something like that. And what I thought was interesting is that you know, you could clearly see the kind of, you know, very typical like Asian like expression in the film, but the audience still enjoyed all those films, and they just, you know, cheers to Paul White or Grace Cunard. And I really don't know why that the part of the army was kind of late released in Japan, but maybe because at that point, I think the American part, they did not have the branch in Japan. Only Universal had it at that point. And I think the 1920s, the United Artists and Paramount just set the branch in Japan. Before that, only Universal established one in 1916. So, you know, all other series, they just had to buy it at like other countries, like in the US or in maybe London. So, you know, if the price is not good for them, or, you know, they have to like negotiate with all those serials. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe that's the reason why the kind of late release of the army, the Pearl of Army is kind of late released in Japan. Yeah. But I believe that Pearl White is one of the best series queens in Japan for the Japanese audience at the time also.
Yeah, well, we'll talk further. I'll
yes,
email you. Yeah, it would be great to collaborate a little more and talk. Yeah, keep talking. Thanks. I don't know if there are questions from the audience.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions yet, but I have a question for Jennifer for you if you're willing to entertain it.
Oh, sure. I have a question for everyone.
All right, so why don't you ask your question for everyone first, and then if we have time, then I'll ask my question for you, or I can also contact you later.
Yeah. We can definitely all talk later. I'll write you both. Yeah. Anu, do you have your? You have your hand up. I see.
Oh yeah, Anu, you have a hand up.
This is such a great panel. I had a question for Yiman, and of course I was thinking throughout about East-West, which is the title of this panel, and there's just so much cross connection between all of the papers that I was very struck by. So for Yiman, I was really struck by the reference to smell that you had in one slide, and that just jumped out so powerfully at me, and how that was something that they thought cinema could kind of squash. And yeah, and I was wondering if you found more sort of material about how people talked about managing extras on the set, because obviously this is something they would have felt, but cinema removed. So yeah, I was very struck by that. It's more than a question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, I was also, when I came across that piece, when Estelle Taylor comments on the native actors as Nellie Lott, I was also really dumbfounded by that very, egregious comment, right? And also, it also makes me think of the film medium itself, right? It sort of mediates the visual and in the setting of filming, it can also bring in the audio aspect, but the smelling, the olfactory dimension is something that's still very much missing, even in contemporary film screening experience, right? So, and then that's also such a racially and class loaded, sometimes also genderly loaded term, right? So I haven't been able to find a lot of information in terms of the production notes and the publicity, how the extras are camera managed on the set. So I think most of the time they are just lumped into the picturesque, the ornamental, and Laura Cerner has this work on the atmosphere, right? The I visualize the extras produce atmosphere. So it's very much on the visual register, very much in compliance with silent film culture. But yes, I will definitely, we can keep in touch too. And if I find more material on how the sensorial experiences are managed, orchestrated in relation to all this underpinning, ideological presumptions, that'll be really interesting to flesh out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and when you're noting the kind of olfactory, being invoked in Yiman, I was really taken by the way in which you're talking about how sound is being, performed pictorially, and the way in which that kind of foregrounds this kind of oral or sonic sensibility to those films. But I was also really curious, just because of my own kind of thinking through the genre of romance. From a kind of British American perspective, 1880s to 1920s is really not about an idealized love, but it seemed to be in the romance of India, the way you're talking about it. And yet there's one version of the romance, the Ruritanian romance, that got started with Prisoner of Zenda, Anthony Hope, and that's what Grace Cunard is replaying in The Broken Coin that Yuki and others have talked about, that was so popular in Japan and colonial Korea. That is about a kind of orientalizing of Eastern Europe and creating these fictional kingdoms in like the Balkan area. And so it occurred to me that with the kind of royalty and those figures, would that be a kind of normative representation? Is that often to see royalty as royal couples? I'm just really curious how that.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Thinking about romance in the way that we see it with Pearl White and Grace Cunard, there is a swashbuckling style that, which takes me back to silent cinema, also our volume, which is in a different register. It's kind of more popular. It's also coming from literature. And what we see in the romance of the Taj Mahal is something that has to have a more elite register, because it is about the king and the queen, and it is about this monument, which is one of the wonders of the world. So definitely there is, which is what I was trying to trace, there are registers of performance here, and the swashbuckling is something that's is more popular, more accessible, but there has to be some distance in the way that viewers are voyeuristically almost invited into this romance between the king and the queen. It's both exotic and inaccessible.
Right. Interesting.
I think we do have another panel after hours, so unfortunately we have to close out this panel. But please do stay in touch. I know I still have a lot of questions that I would like to ask both of you. So let's stay in touch, and if anybody in the audience have questions we didn't get a chance to ask, please do feel free to reach out to us, and we're all Googleable. So yeah. All right, so thank you so much for being on the panel and giving such wonderful papers, and thanks to the audience for listening and participating.
Thank you, Nan.
Thank you all so much for a great panel. Thank you.